Hello everyone. I hope all of you are doing well. So this is the video for the last lab. We'll go through the last lab questions, which is 8D, lab 8D, and this is the first question. It says that we're supposed to write a method which is called diamond print, which takes one number as parameter as the size of the diamond and prints the following shape on the screen. So basically it prints it out this way. It's a diamond, apparently. and we're supposed, so for example, if the height of the diamond or the size of the diamond is 5, it should print for me um, 5, let's say, rows. If I consider each of them as like rows, this is a row, this is a row, and then this is a row. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 rows. But then if it's the first row, you only print 1 once. If it's the second row, you print 2, but you print it 3 times, so odd. And then if it's the third row, you print 3, but you print it 5 times. So again, odd numbers: 1, 3, 5, and then 3, and then 1. Similar to our triangle print method, but it's not a triangle, it's a diamond, and you're not printing stars, you're printing numbers with spaces. Now note, as you program, sorry, your program should check that the input is an odd number, as even number size diamonds don't work. Otherwise, print size must be an odd number. So if the number that is being passed to this method is not an even number, is an even number, and it's not an odd number, then in that case you need to print out to the user size must be an odd number. All right. Oh, this is from the previous one. Let me just remove it quickly. Okay. Now here, how do we create the method? So the first thing we need to write is the method header. It's not returning anything, doesn't mention anything about return. If we notice here also, there's nothing mentioned about return. It does mention about a parameter, which is a number. Again, if we look here, I can assume it's an integer. So we'll write it this way: public static void diamond print brackets int size. All right, and the body. So this is the header, this is the body. Now in diamond print, what should happen? The first thing you need to check if the size is even or odd. So if the size was actually even, which is if you divide it by 2 and there is a remainder, that means it's an even size. In this case, you print out to the user size must be an odd number. So I print that out here. And then don't forget to return, because if you don't return, your program will continue. And we don't want it to continue, right? So in this case, you return, and then, or if you want, just write everything else in an else bracket. Oh, sorry, else block. It's up to you. I prefer returning it, so I don't have to worry about the else brackets and everything. So here, I'm done with checking if it is even or not. The first thing we need to know is what is happening basically. So let's say you're only displaying one, okay, let's say the height of or the size of the diamond was 5. All right. On the first row, you're only displaying one number. If you're displaying one number, you need to display before it 5 spaces. All right. Now on the second line, we're displaying 3 numbers. All right. So if there are 3 numbers, you only need to display 2 spaces. Why? Because the height or the size minus how many numbers you're displaying. So 5 minus 1 will give you 4. That many spaces you need to display before that number. Don't worry about these spaces. We don't care about those. We only care about how many spaces we need to display before the number. before printing the number. So in this case, if because there's only one number and the size of the diamond is 5, 5 minus 1 is 4. So you need to put 4 spaces. Similarly, because this is the first row, now this is the second row. So second row, and you're displaying, let's say 3. Yeah, you're displaying 3 numbers. So when you're displaying 3 numbers, you need to, before this, you need to have that many equivalent spaces. All right. And actually, I don't think it depends on, okay, let's see how this should be coded, but I know that it depends on the size and on which row you are. This is the first row. You're only displaying 1. So 5 minus 1 is 4. So you need to display 4 spaces. But let's see. All right. So we'll start coding it with the for loop. For int row is equal to, let's start with 1. Row should be less than or equal to size plus plus row. All right. Now plus plus row, let's see if we need to use plus plus row or row is equal to row plus 2. Let's see. The first thing that I want to do is display spaces, right? The number comes after, but the first thing that you do is display spaces. Now that is also a repetition, because if you have, let's say, 4 spaces, you need to display it 4 times, right? You're not going to display like S out and 4 spaces, because that will then display on each of the lines. So for that, again, for int, I'll name it space is equal to 0, or let's start with 1. Space should be less than or equal to row, or sorry, size, whatever the size is. Let's say the size is 5. On which row you are, so size minus row, you need to display that many spaces. So if size is 5 and you're on the first row, this will become 4. So you need to start from 1, and until 4 you need to display spaces. All right, so plus plus space, and then just print out empty space. Remember, don't use ln because it will start printing on different lines. Instead, use the print method. All right, so this is for printing that space. All right, now for int column is equal to 1, column is less than or equal to row, plus plus column, and there you need to print out again. Okay, so what are we printing out? We're printing out numbers ranging from 1 to 5, right? And there's no way of keeping track of that. So what I'll do is create a number variable started from 1, and then just print out number with a space, because if you notice, there's a space being printed out between each numbers, right? So I'll print out that number, and then don't forget to increment that number and also move to the next line, because after printing this whole line, we need to move to the next line, right? So if I call this method here in diamond print, let's say 7, what happens? Let's see. Okay, now the problem is it should have printed it this way: 1, 2, but 3 times. But if you notice here, 2 is being printed only 2 times. That is because this row is considered as the second row, and it's only taking 2, it's the columns are only 2. If we change it this way, row is equal to row plus 2, and run it again, see, now 2 is being printed 3 times, 3 is being printed 5 times, and 4 is being printed 7 times. So we're halfway there. We just need to uh, reverse it now. So all I'm going to do is copy this whole thing, okay, and change this to size -2 because I don't want it to print 7 times again. I now need the number 5 to be printed 5 times, just like this. So it comes in this shape, right? So I'll change this to size -2. I'll change this to 1 -2. And that should be it. All right. The only thing that I did was I printed, okay, the spaces will not make you see it that way, but I'll show it to you here. If I change it to hyphen, see what happens. So this is the first row, right? How many hyphens were printed instead of spaces? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I chose 7 as the largest number, right? So on the first row, when you're printing one number, you're printing 6 hyphens or 6 spaces. On the second row, when you're printing 3 numbers, you're printing out 4 spaces. 4 plus 3 will give you 7. Similarly, on the next line, you're printing out 5 numbers. So that means before those 5 numbers, you need to print 2 spaces. All right. That is why we're taking size minus row. So size will always be 7, and on whichever row you are, let's say you're on the first row, you will pick you'll write 7 minus 1 will give you 6, so you will print out 6 spaces. If you're on the second row, but in this case it's not second, it's not considered second because after 1 you'll jump to 3 because row 1 plus 2 will give you 3, right? So after the first row, you're jumping to the third row, and there you're going to say 7 minus 3 is 4. So you're printing out 4 spaces. Similarly, after the third row, you'll jump to the fifth row. That means you'll print out 5 numbers. And before 5, 7 minus 5 will give you 2. So that many spaces you need to print out. Similarly for the reverse case. If I run this again, same. If you're printing out 5, the size is 7. 7 minus 5 is 2. 7 minus 3 is 4. And 7 minus 1 is 6. So you're printing out 6 spaces or hyphens. All right. So I think this should be clear. I'll paste this in NetBeans and let's see what happens. So here I'm going to paste it, copy it, Shift Tab, Shift and then Tab, so it gets indented properly, and press on pre-check, probably comments. Okay. First half of diamond, second half of diamond, new line, increment number. Let's see if it works. Perfect. Let's click on check. Perfect. So that's your first question. So for the second question, this is a very important question. I would highly recommend that you go through it for preparing for your exam. Here it says that the Information and E-Government Authority requested you to design an application that saves data of names and country of birth of Bahrain residents. The program contains a public array called residents names that includes a maximum of 100 customers and another public array birth country saved as string. Write a method get list in country that returns the list of people who were born in the country given in parameter. You do not need to declare and initialize the public arrays, birth countries, and residents within the method body. They're already declared. You just have to access them. So here, what is happening basically is that we are supposed to, okay, before that, let me show you how this is working. So basically they're saying that there is an array for countries and it looks something like this. And then another one for residents that looks something like this. All right. So what they mean is if on index 0 there is Bahrain, that means it is the birth country of the resident in index 0 in the residence array, meaning Ali was born in Bahrain, Adam was born in UAE, John was born in USA, Harry was born in UK, Aisha was born in Bahrain, and Maryam was born in UAE. This is basically how it is stored. So every country has a corresponding citizen that was a resident that was born in that country on the same index. So if on index 1 there is UAE, that means it is the birth country of the resident on index 1 in the residence array. That is exactly what it means. All right. Your job or your task in this method is to find how many people were born in the country that is being passed here. So let's assume this country was Bahrain. You have to go through the country's array and see how many people were born in Bahrain. So on the first or on the 0 index, there is Bahrain, right? That means Ali was born in Bahrain and then Aisha was born in Bahrain. So you need to return the list of people that were born in Bahrain. You need to go through the basic idea is you need to go through the countries array, find at which index there is this specified country, and use that index in the residence array to find which people were born in that country. All right, so let's say Bahrain is at 0 index and then 1, 2, 3, 4, fourth index. So 0 and 4 index, there is Bahrain. So you need to go to the residence array at the 0 index and the 4th index to pick the name of the people that were born in Bahrain. That is the basic gist. Now there are two challenges here. We need to return back an array, all right? And we don't know how many people were actually born in Bahrain. Because when you want to create an array, you need to specify its size. So for example, I want to create an array to store the name of the people that were born in Bahrain, but I don't know how many people were born. So I don't know what should be the size of the array. So that's your first challenge. And I think that's the only challenge basically. You need to just figure out how many people were born so you can create that array list. Sorry, that array using the size. All right. So how do we do that? One way of doing that is you can go through all the countries that are saved in the countries array. You can go through them and count how many times this country was listed in this array. That many, sorry, that many times you can um, whatever that count is, using that count you can create the size, an array with that specified size to store the name of the people. It might sound a bit confusing, but this is the basic gist. We'll go through it and it will become more clear. So the first thing is we need to figure out how many times this specific country is repeated in the countries array. All right, so for that, I will, let's say, create an integer count to store how many matches were there, and then I'll create a for loop to go over the countries array and see how many times this specific country was repeated in the countries array. Index should be, now what is the name of the array? It's mentioned here as birth countries. So I'll pick that, birth countries dot len, and then plus plus index. All right. And I'll just write if this country that I have as parameter dot equals ignore case um, birth countries of index. All right, then you just increment your count. All right, and that means at every position, if the country is the same, you just increment count, meaning initially your count is 0. But let's say you start this loop and the first place is Bahrain, right? So that matches, assuming that this country is considered Bahrain. The first one is Bahrain, so this will be the same. This will match. That means your count now becomes 1. Now your index changes, you move to the next index. The next one is UAE. UAE is not the same as Bahrain, so you skip this and increment your index. Go to USA. USA is not same as Bahrain. Again, skip. Go to UK. Not the same. Skip. Go to the next one, and it's Bahrain again. So now your count becomes 2. All right. So similarly, when you're done iterating through the array, you'll have the number of times the countries repeating in the birth countries array. Now we have the count. What you can do is you can create the array for storing the people names. So I'll name it names. That's the most suitable one to name. String array names is equal to new string array count. All right, now I have it. Now all you need to do is copy this code again. All right, and instead of count, now you just write um, people, oh sorry, names of, now what do we use here? The thing is, if I use index, some of the places will become empty, right? So for that, I can use another counter. Let's name it as int position is equal to 0. Actually, let me show you what happens if I don't use this position, and then I'll show you what difference it makes. So if I write index, names of index is equal to residence, because that's where all the name of the people are stored, of index. All right, and then that means take this index and whatever is the name or whatever person is there in the residence array at that index, save it into the names array, and finally you just return names because you're supposed to return a string array. Now notice what happens. If I click on pre-check, see, because your, let's say there were only 9 matches, so your string, your array, actually string array was created with the size 9, but you're trying to access or store at, let's say one of the residents was stored, or one of the countries was at the 19th index in the birth country, and the name was stored at the 19th index of the residence country. But you don't have the 19th index here because you only created it with the 9 matches that you found, right? So for that, we will use position. I will just write position here. And then once I've added to that position, I'll just increment position. And the error should be gone. And yes, now it's working fine. See, now it's displaying everything properly. If we click on check, now it's fine. If there is nobody found, the array is empty. What happens if you don't keep, let's say, this count? If I just leave it as 100 because that's mentioned as like the maximum number of customers, then what happens if I click on check? See, even the first one is incorrect because now it's printing all the null values where nothing was stored because you gave it a size of 100, nothing was stored, and that's why it's printing the null values. If you find how many matches are there and you create the array based on that uh, number, then everything should be fine. Okay, so that's how it's done. So this is the second question. Now moving on to the third one, it says create a method that replicates the Unix ls command, which is list. The method takes the name of a folder as a parameter and prints on the screen the content of the folder. Remember that by default, the ls command does not display hidden files starting with dot. An error message should be printed if the folder does not exist. Okay, the name of the method is ls. We are not returning anything, and we are only taking a parameter as string. All right, so public static void, because we're not returning anything. Ls is the name of the method. It's taking a string for, I think, folder name. All right. Now we know if we want to access folder and do anything with the folder, we need to create the file object, right? So file, I'll create the file object saying, naming it file is equal to new file, and then I'll pass the folder name. All right. Now, how do I check if it doesn't exist? Using the exists command. So if file dot exists is equal to false, if it returns false for you, that means it does not exist. So you can just write folder does not exist. Just remember, the file object can be used for both folders and files. So that's not the issue in this question. Folder does not exist. All right, and I can just return, so I don't have to worry about creating else and everything. Now, what happens next? If it does exist, then you need to list whatever is there in that folder, right? So basically here, what we're supposed to do is there's a method in the file object that is called dot list. So it's something like file dot list that actually lists everything that is there within this file object, whether that's folder or a file. And this list method returns a string array. So I'll call it, let's say, list is equal to. So this is going to return an array list, which not an array list, I'm so sorry. It's going to return a string array, which I'm going to store here. And the name of it is list. All right. Now I'll use a for loop to iterate through it. Int index is equal to 0. I'm going to iterate through this list. All right. So if index is equal to 0, index is less than or equal to, less than list dot length plus plus index, what should you do now? So here, this string array basically stores the names of whatever was there, whatever list was there, the names of that list, it is being stored here. So all you have to do is print out that name. So I'll just write system.out.println list of index. Oops, sorry. Click on pre-check. Okay, so that's fine. And click on check. Perfect. So it's went through all tests. The only new thing was file.list. It gives you the list. It gives you this list. So whatever files are there, it gives you the names of those files as an array list, and you can just loop over it, loop through it to print it out. So that's your third question. Now the final question is, it says create method that replicates the Unix ls /al command, which is it prints a detailed list. The method takes the name of a folder as a parameter and prints on the screen the content of the folder. An error message should be printed if the folder does not exist. To simplify the command, only the name and the size of the file will be displayed. The format of the output should be file name and comma file size. So you print out the file name and you print out the size. Okay, let's see how we can do that. Okay, so that's very, very simple. If I can copy this code here, we just have to change it a bit. The name of the method is now LSAL, so I'll change that here. Again, we have the folder name. We're checking if it exists or not. Now here is where we change something. Here I'm going to create a file object to get, because I need to get the file absolute path, meaning whatever the folder name is, slash the file name. I could simply print the folder name and then the slash file name, but that wouldn't give me the size. The size I can only get when I create an object, a file object for this file. All right. So I have to create a file object. I'll name it, let's say, list file is equal to, or we can name it item. Item is equal to new file. Now what name do we pass? Do we pass the name directly or do we pass the name with the folder? We have to pass the name with the folder because it needs to find where that file is, right? So I'll use the folder name plus the slash and then plus the file name, which is in list of index. All right, and then using this, I can just print out item dot, I forgot the method name. I think it is get absolute path, but let's see, absolute path. This will give you the path with the name of the folder, slash, and the name of the file. Now there's a plus with a comma. There's a comma, there's a space, and then item dot length will actually give you the size of the file. I hope this works. Let's click on pre-check. Excellent. I want to see if it works without the folder name. Let's try that. If I remove the folder name, what happens? Does it find it? No, it is not going to find it because it's not printing out that project. Or what we can do, actually yeah, it didn't find even the size. So I think you have to add that. Recheck again. And finally check. And that's it. So this is how you would do. The only difference was you created a file within the loop to get the actual properties of the file, and you used the get absolute path to display the folder name and to get the length. That's it for all the labs in this course. I hope this was useful. I hope you understand it. If you don't understand it, please feel free to contact me. I would highly, highly, highly recommend that you go over the second question from this lab, practice it as much as you can for the exam, and Yeah, because I think this is a good example for you to practice for the exam. And I think that's it for this video. If you have any questions, let me know, and have a great day.